Hagar! Hagar! Come here for a moment! I shouted out through the door, tapping my foot impatiently. I scowled down at the pile of crumpled clothes beneath me. Disgusting. Surely I deserved better. I was a leader, and leaders needed to look their best. This wasn't a matter of vanity, but of respectability. There was a reason presidents always wore suits, that kings bared purple and gold. It showed nobility, power, stature, influence, and I saw no reason why I should be different. But glancing at my current outfit, I did not see any of those traits in the slightest. It was better than what I used to wear, this was true, but then again, that was an exceedingly low bar. I had been wearing what were, in essence, rags. These new clothes were, at the very least, not full of patchwork stitches and holes, but they were also simple. The kind of clothes that any random person on the street would wear. Simple jeans and a play gray shirt. I was better than that. I was. Hagar finally made herself known, knocking on the door lightly to signify she was outside my apartment. Yes, come in, I said, already growing annoyed with her idiotic face and meek stature, despite the fact she hadn't even entered the room yet. I sighed. She was useful, at least. If that ever stopped being true, however, I couldn't see myself keeping her for long. The constant whining and questions and blah blah blah. It's enough to drive anyone crazy. Why couldn't she just do what she was told, quickly and quietly? It wasn't like I was asking her to do the impossible, just a few simple tasks here and there. Frankly, she should feel honored that I was generous enough to allow her to work so close to me at all. I was meant for great things, after all. Big, important things. And she should consider herself blessed. I deemed her competent enough to spend any appreciable time with me. Most could not consider themselves so lucky. Miss Athaliah? Did you need something? Her voice broke through my thoughts, causing me to focus back into reality. I looked over at her, taking in that she too had changed into some much nicer, if slightly ill-fitting, clothes. We had been at my old apartment building for a while now, and people were beginning to settle in, scavenging what they could, choosing various rooms and furniture to claim for themselves. I, of course, had gotten first pick, but my dissatisfaction with what we had found was why I called Hagar to my room in the first place. Yes, I do. Look at these clothes, Hagar. She stared at them blankly, then looked back at me for an explanation. I sighed. This was the kind of thing I was talking about. Not a single brain behind that girl's eyes. So, I explained it to her. None of these are acceptable, Hagar. Soon, perhaps within a couple of days, maybe even today, we are going to need to form a search party to find outfits that don't look like they were dredged up from the bottom of the ocean. I think I'll lead it myself. I want to show the people that I'm not just all talk, that I actually am their leader. Besides, there are some very specific clothes I want. I was thinking that a red dress would look nice on me, don't you think? She opened her mouth, but I didn't give her a chance to respond. I think it would look lovely. I sighed again, happier this time. I could see it now, clear as day. Me, standing here in front of this mirror, but wearing a long, velvet, deep red dress with frills and accents and all sorts of little things. I would be so beautiful, so powerful. I had never worn anything like that before. In fact, I had never even worn a dress before, but, well, things were different now, weren't they? If I wanted a red dress, I would get one. I said, and it was done. Just like that. It was so perfect in my mind's eye. Everything exactly as I wanted it. But as my fantasy continued, as I thought more of it, of me spinning around my room in that lovely thing, I saw the door to my room creak open. I did not wish for this to happen. It seemed impossible, but there it was, happening within my own imagination. I tried to will it away, to imagine the door closing once more and leaving me to myself in my wonderful dress, but I found I could not. It was as though I was dreaming, but I was wide awake. This was not like my previous visions. Those had always been through the eyes of others, seeing things that I needed to interpret and understand. I was still me, in my own room, looking through my own eyes, feeling my own strange fear over a door that I did not want to open, but opened anyway. I could feel the door calling to me, telling me to gaze upon it, and almost against my will I turned, despite everything in my body telling me not to. And in that door, in that blackened frame, a dark figure stood. Behind it lay nothing but an endless void that seemed to stretch on to infinity, where moments before there had been a normal apartment hallway. But I could scarcely bring myself to even acknowledge that, much less focus on it, when all I could seem to see was the thing standing in front of me. It simply stood there, illuminated only by the suddenly dim light that struggled through the murky glass on the window on the opposite side of the room, and I could only make out the barest features from its visage. It seemed to be nothing but a void, devoid of any life. As I froze, rooted to the spot, it walked forward, slowly, methodically, and as it left that empty frame, I saw that it was me. It was me, but it was not me, for even though it bore my eyes and mouth and nose, I knew it could not be me, for it was covered head to toe in terrible aberrations, insults to the flesh made real. Its naked body quivered and shook before me, strange lumps of skin and muscle that were arranged seemingly at random, moving in unison with it. There were mouths, so many mouths, gnawing and mashing and chewing on air, or worse, eating other parts of the terrible creature in an act of self-cannibalism that made me nearly lose my lunch. As I watched, a red-rimmed mouth on the right arm, near the elbow, somehow stretched itself forward, biting into a finger that laid just underneath it. It tore it clean off with a sickening crunch, and I could only stare as it chewed and swallowed the appendage. I do not know where the chewed meat went after that. Eyes gazed around, some of them at the walls, some at the ceiling, but mostly at me. All sorts of different eyes, from brown to blue to red, none of them where they should be. One particularly beady eye glared out at me from the neck of the thing that bore my face, squinting as though I was a particularly disgusting bug that had just crawled out from underneath a rock. I suddenly felt as though I perfectly understood how the man with the scar must have felt moments before I beat him to death. The thing took another shambling step forward, and finally I could move, managing a shaky step back, mirroring it in a way I did not like to think about. Drool dribbled from its many, many orifices, pooling down onto the carpeted ground, sinking into the fabric. I had a wild thought about how that was going to leave a stain. Another step forward, another step back, and suddenly I was falling backwards, tripping over the beautiful red dress I had forgotten I was wearing, now a detriment rather than a boon. Right. That was why I had never worn dresses before. It took another step forward, then another, and suddenly it was on top of me, its pale and putrid flesh reaching out to grab me. I fumbled backwards, hitting the wall on the other side of the apartment with nowhere else to go. It reached out a hand to touch me, small pustules bursting into strange fluid as it extended its arm, eyes that covered its body squinting as the sickening fluid got into them, but never taking their gaze off of me. It touched me then, and I screamed as I saw its horrible limbs simply sink into my own, becoming part of my body like the way two streams merge together. It spoke then, in a voice that, like everything else about it, was my own, but not my own. It said to me, "Soon." Suddenly I opened my eyes, no longer wearing a velvet dress, but rather my ordinary everyday street clothes, no longer staring up at that monstrosity, but instead Hagar's confused and concerned face as she peered down from me as I huddled in the corner of my room. I had no idea how I had gotten there. Strangely, someone was screaming. It took a moment to realize it was me. I quickly shut my mouth, muffling the sound, but still hearing it come from deep within my chest, as though someone had just covered my face with a rag to shut me up. I breathed heavily, trying to stop, but being unable to. I stole a glance towards Hagar, who looked as though she was ready to bolt out of the room, and I knew I needed to get it under control now. I forced myself to swallow, feeling as though a bowling ball was rolling down my throat, but I managed to get it down somehow, stopping the screaming. I gave Hagar what I hoped to be a disarming grin, but I am sure came across more as the look of an abused child that was just told to smile for the picture, and shakily stood back up on my feet. The silence was deafening from the woman as we stared at each other, and I knew I needed to reassure her with something fast. I cleared my throat to help get rid of the aforementioned bowling ball, saying, "That was, not appropriate. Don't worry about it. Let's just pretend it never happened and move on. I believe we were talking about sending people out to get supplies?" Hagar's mouth dropped open, staring at me in shock. I attempted to continue, listing off more things that we were going to need in the near future, perhaps a little faster than strictly necessary. Of course, we will also need food, water, batteries, medical supplies, things like that. Make sure to be writing all of this down, it's important. Hagar finally spoke then, voice soft and uncertain. "Miss Athaliah, not to be, rude or anything, but are we not going to talk about what just happened? You just collapsed, screaming and crying while crawling away and yelling about how you won't let it touch you. Is everything all right?" My nervous speech ground to a halt as I listened to her say those words. "Well, yes, actually, Hagar," I thought to myself. "Something did happen. Excellent input as always. You see, my fantasy was just invaded. Already a bizarre thing to happen, but don't worry, it gets better. You see, it was by a beast that looked like me and talked like me, but was actually a nightmare made real, and it told me something was going to happen soon. But I really don't think it's that big of a deal. Certainly not something worth worrying about or telling the others about, because then I would look insane and unfit to lead, and that is simply unacceptable. So let's just keep this between us, Somehow, I didn't think that would be particularly reassuring. Maybe I should just kill her. It would make sure she would never speak of this again, and it's not like it would be particularly difficult. She was a weak, frail thing after all. My eyes flicked to the bent and twisted metal pipe in the corner. I wasn't sure why I had hung on to it, but I had brought it all the way up to my room, going so far as to prop it up in the corner like some strange modern art piece. Call it a reminder, I suppose. Or perhaps nostalgia. Whatever the case, it was available to me now. But could I kill her in such a way that it wouldn't be obvious that I had done it? Probably not. We were alone in this room, after all, and everyone knew that she hung around me constantly. Besides, as I had said earlier, she was still at least somewhat useful, although that cost-benefit ratio was rapidly dwindling. If something like this happened again, I would most certainly have to dispose of her. So instead, I smiled at her, more confidently this time, and sat down at the end of my bed. I gestured for her to come and sit down in front of me on the floor, so she was peering up at me the way a small child would. She looked at me strangely for a moment, confused, but slowly did what I said, even sitting in a crisscross pattern. That was good. That was what I really liked about her, why I kept her around. She did as she was told. "All right, I understand," I began. "That was weird and scary. I know that you want to know what is going on, so allow me to explain." I took a deep breath. Obviously, I couldn't tell her the truth. That information was for me and me alone. If she were to find out, then that would introduce uncertainty into the mix, and as loyal as she was, I simply couldn't risk it. A secret is only truly safe when in the company of one, after all. So instead, I thought up a lie. "You see, Hagar, I've been under a lot of stress recently. What with trying to lead everyone to safety, and trying to provide for everyone, and just keeping our whole family here happy and healthy, and hiding the fact that I have an eyeball in my stomach, it really takes its toll on a person. You understand that, right? Of course you do. So, as a result, it seems there was a small episode of me releasing said stress, and unfortunately you were there to see that. But I assure you, it's really nothing to worry about. We all have moments where it's just a little too much for us. I'm sure you know that perfectly well. I have seen the way you struggle to navigate everyday life, and that's all right. Not everyone can be as well put together as I am. I saw Hagar taking a breath to say something, but I continued on anyway. Now, don't worry, nothing like that is going to happen in front of you again, or indeed anyone else. This was a one-time deal, a brief moment of, don't say weakness, you are not weak. A moment of self-expression. And you don't feel the need to tell anyone about this, do you? I shook my head slowly, indicating that she should as well. A moment. A brief pause, and then she mimed the motion. That's very good, Hagar. Like I said, we don't want to worry anyone, right? So, no need to bring it up again. Hey! I suddenly stood up, causing Hagar to quickly fumble to her feet as well. You know what? Why don't you go ahead and head on downstairs? Pick something nice out for yourself from the goods we have collected. Whatever you want, your pick. You deserve it for being such a good girl and doing what you're told. She glanced towards the door, then back at me, uncertain. I gave an encouraging smile and nod. Yes, it's all right. Go on. I'll catch up with you in a bit. I just need to do some stuff here first, but it'll be just a moment. She gave me another glance, then slowly started to head out the door, going to pick up some blasé outfit or something like that, I'm sure. I couldn't really care less. Actually, now that I think about it, there was one thing I didn't want her to take. Oh, actually, hold on a moment, Hagar. She paused at the door, hand on the doorknob, but turning back toward me, eyes wide. You can have whatever you want, but no red dresses, okay? I want to look through them. Maybe we won't have to go out on a gathering party after all if we already have a suitable one here. She spoke, her meek voice even quieter than normal. But, Miss Athaliah, what about, the food and things like that? Her voice trailed off towards the end as I narrowed my eyes at her. Do you think that I had forgotten about that? I just meant we didn't need to send a party out for clothes specifically. We will need things like food, obviously. Don't be dense, Hagar. Now go. I have things I need to do. She looked at me as though she still wanted to say something, but left anyway, closing the door behind her. I let out a deep sigh, sitting back down onto my bed. What a mess. What a mess indeed. It was simply embarrassing. But what was that? Never had my visions been like that before, so personal and involved with me as an actual participant. It was worrying, to say the least. I had to hope this wasn't an indication of things to come. A thought crept into my brain, slow and oozing, like a worm covered in slime. I wonder if this vision was connected to the appearance of the things on my body. Now that I thought about it, it seemed so obvious. The thing in the vision had been covered head to toe in them, and did a second one not just recently make its appearance on my person? I rushed over to the mirror, quickly pulling up my shirt. There indeed sat the eye, glancing around and looking at everything and nothing. And yes, if I pulled my shirt down just enough, there was the mouth, gnashing away above my heart, eating the air. I suppose I should consider myself lucky that it did not begin to speak. Oh, but what's this? No, my luck continues to spiral. For there, on the side of my torso, fingers of indeterminate size and features sprouted from my skin the way a plant sprouts from the ground. They waved around slowly in the air, attempting to grasp anything that came near. Well, that was very much not good. As the old saying goes, once is bad luck, twice is a coincidence, but 3 times is a pattern. I was changing. I came across the idea that I did actually know what the creature in my vision was referring to when it said, soon. It meant that I would soon look like it. And I did not like that thought very much. I pulled my shirt back down, covering up the offending digits, or at least trying to. But these did not seem to want to be as cooperative as the eye and mouth, for they stubbornly extended to their fullest length, causing my shirt to swell as they poked at it. No, no, no. Not when I was finally where I deserved to be. Not when I was finally in charge. They would not take this from me. I turned and rummaged through my bag on the ground, looking for something nobody should ever do without. Ah, there it was. Duct tape. Never go anywhere without it. I ripped off a piece, using my teeth to tear it, taking mild enjoyment from the soft ripping noise. Very satisfying. I then pulled up my shirt and, with little fanfare, taped the fingers down so they were as flush with my body as I could get them. The tape was rough and sticky against my skin, but where it made contact with the fingers, I felt nothing. Whether that was a good or bad thing, I did not know. I pulled out and stuck on 2 more pieces of tape for good measure, just to make sure they would really not be wriggling free. No such thing as being overprepared, after all. Afterwards, I threw the tape onto the bed and pulled my shirt down, admiring my handiwork. There was a slight lump there, it was undeniable, but if you really weren't looking for it, you would never have noticed it. I nodded to myself, pleased. That was one problem solved. But what about the vision and the way it had arrived, unwanted and uninvited? That was not good. If it happened again, in front of a large group, it would be impossible to cover up. Unfortunately, I couldn't think of anything to do about it. Well, actually. My eyes strayed over to my bag and I walked over to it, pulling out the container of meat that I had stashed away at the very bottom. It appeared to be a perfectly normal hunk of nondescript animal flesh, except for the fact that it had been stored in a backpack in a plastic container with no cooling, and yet showed absolutely no sign of rot or decay. It's not as though it was even particularly cold out. That was probably unusual. I eyed it cautiously. Pretty much everything that had happened up to this point could be traced back to this meat and that fateful encounter with that man in the room in the sewers. I had seen a man fall into a pit of acid, and what was my response? To take the strange flesh from that place and consume it, even giving it to others as a way of increasing my own influence and standing. Why? Had it been out of sheer desperation? I had been so hungry that I was willing to do something so unseemly? Or was it something more? Had I been called to that room by something I didn't quite understand, called for the reason that I was special and important? Could it even be that this was some form of destiny, of taking my rightful place as a leader with the aid of this unexpected force? Everything I had seen up to this point would suggest yes. The visions that only I would get, even though others partook in the flesh. My ability to see the future and divine it into usable information. One could even argue that there was the increase in my social standing and my sudden rise to leadership. It all seemed to line up to suggest my importance. The only thing that didn't seem to fit were these horrible things that were appearing on my body. But, I reasoned with myself, perhaps they were simply an unavoidable side effect. One of those things that nobody really wants, but simply has to happen anyway. Akin to taking medicine to help with a disease and it causing you to become tired. Yes, that made sense. I nodded to myself in the mirror, pleased with this conclusion. It all made perfect sense. And thus, I turned and walked out of my room, worries gone from my mind. Time to go and lead my flock, as I was chosen to do so. In fact, thinking about it, I already had an idea on how to further cement my place as ruler. It was a tad risky, but I had faith in them, and in my own powers of persuasion.